Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Christina Fox. I'm the CEO here at Tech Alliance. As the Regional Innovation Center for Southwestern Ontario, Tech Alliance empowers world-class ventures and fuels growth in Canada's innovation economy. We champion and coach entrepreneurs, amplify and impact businesses, and contribute to a bold technology community across the region. We're the place for dreamers, innovators, and world-changing ideas, and in pursuit of creating spaces where innovation thrives, we must be bold and lift others as we rise. To put it simply, we support entrepreneurs and ventures at every step of the entrepreneurial journey. If you'd like to engage with our venture growth team, read stories about innovation that is shaping our community with world-changing ideas, or join other upcoming experiences, I invite you to subscribe to our newsletter using the link in the chat. Acknowledging the stolen land upon which Tech Alliance sits is merely a starting point. As settlers, it's imperative to honor the region's First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island, recognize the trauma, genocide, and history of Indigenous peoples. This land is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, the Attawandaron, and the Wendat. To advance truth and reconciliation, our team is committed to continued learning, advocacy, and actively working alongside Indigenous-led businesses and entrepreneurs. Before we get started, a few housekeeping points. All online participants are muted. Your mics are muted, so please relax and enjoy yourselves. Today's masterclass will be recorded and available for replay on our YouTube channel. I encourage you to add questions to the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and to add any comments in our active chat feature. To get the conversation going, pop in the chat what you hope to take away from today's deep dive into data room best practices. Go for it. Data rooms are imperative for all ventures and must be prioritized by entrepreneurs to secure financing and to protect and organize their most precious intangible assets. So today we'll learn how to prepare, develop, and maintain a data room to securely house your most valuable data. So now, of course, I have the distinct privilege to introduce one of Canada's most highly recommended patent prosecutors. Her expertise is vast in the arena of intellectual property law, IP strategy, and managing corporate data, and she has a passion for spurring innovation. Natalie Raffoul is a world-renowned IP lawyer, co-founder and managing partner at Brion Raffoul LLP, and the co-founder of Fortress.Legal, an intangible asset management system. She is consistently ranked among the world's leading patent practitioners in the IAM Patent 1000 publication and has been recognized in the IAM Strategy 300. Natalie was appointed to Ontario's first expert panel on IP and subsequently as an advisor to the Joint Ministers Roundtable on Ontario Health Platform. She has led and taught Train the Trainer courses for the World Intellectual Property Office, WIPO, in Saudi Arabia and the Ukraine, and by the request of WIPO, partook in a new pilot program to assess the IP strategy of green technology companies located in Brazil. Natalie is incredibly knowledgeable and experienced when it comes to intellectual property and the importance of creating and maintaining your data room. So we're so thrilled to have her here with us today. And with that, I hand you over to the capable hands of Natalie to lead us through this masterclass of building your data room. Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Christina, for that very lengthy intro. So very excited to be here. Thank you to Tech Alliance, to all the folks at Tech Alliance. And my alma mater is Western, so I'm disappointed I can't be there with you in person. But next time, perhaps we can get down there and be able to be face to face. So it's a timely topic, data rooms. As we're entering this changing economic climate, I mean, you just have to pick up a newspaper or take a look at those interest rates to know that things are changing on the economy. And building your data room is about show me the money. It's about getting a great valuation for your company, particularly if it's oriented towards getting investment. And what it comes down to is the intangible assets. And so we'll get into that, and we'll talk about how to really structure data rooms, but also from a high level, really what are you orienting towards as you build your data room. Just advance. So great introduction. Just to add to that, I've been in the IP space now for 22 years. Launched my own tech startup back in 2020 with Fortress.Legal. So I understand, for those of you that are going to be out there raising money, last year we raised about $1 million in pre-seed and have had the fortune of getting a few $100,000 in grant money now from IRAP to build out Fortress. And so I get it from your perspective in terms of if you're heading into a fundraising, I understand the stress of creating those data rooms and getting ready for financing. It is challenging. And also I've been on it as the IP lawyer, helping companies much later stage, Series A, B, C, and the frantic midnight emails, helping them get organized for due diligence. And as you move up in terms of what you're requesting in terms of the funding pocket, the due diligence just gets that much more rigorous. And so I've been advising the tech ecosystem for a long time, but also I've been investing in the tech ecosystem. And it's interesting, and I'll add a little bit of color to our talk today, but my investment ethos has also changed over the years. And so, how I invest or what I look for and what I want to see in that data room has changed over the years as I've learned, and I've invested in companies that have failed. And so, you pick up things along the way that I'm going to share anecdotally as well. So, welcome to the intangibles economy. And if you aren't familiar with this term intangibles, you really need to get familiar. We are in an economy where we are not valuing tangible assets the way we used to. So there's been a massive shift. And what you're looking at here is the valuation of the S&P 500. What's the market value there? And this is an index, US index that probably most of you are familiar with. But how we value companies today is not based on the number of cars that are sitting on the lot, the barrels of oil, the products on shelves. We're looking at the intangible assets of that company, the data. How valuable is data today? The goodwill, the trademarks, the brand, the trade secrets, those contract rights, that proprietary information, the research and development, the designs, and the patents, of course, being a patent person, highly valuable to companies as well. And we've gotten to a point where now, today, this number is about 91% of the value is in the intangible assets of a company, and only 9% is really related to those tangible assets, those products that are physically sitting in some warehouse or on some shelf. So it's really changed. And if you look at the companies like the FANG companies, the Facebook, Amazon, Apple, we like to lovingly call them the FANGs, their value, really 95% of that is coming from the intangible assets. So there's really been a massive shift in terms of the types of assets companies are acquiring. There's a global trend here that is gaining in momentum. And what you're looking at here is just a very simplified graph of what's happening in terms of those registered rights around intangibles. So patents, for example, which are both, you see utility models on this graph, but you also see patents. A combination of that, over the last 10 years, you've seen filings go from about 3 million patent filings a year to 6 million patent filings annually globally. Trademarks is not even factored on this graph. It went from 5 million to 15 million annual trademark applications to register that brand, to make sure your trademark is protected. And designs, again, a few 100,000 annually to 1 million design registrations, folks registering the designs for their finished products. So there is much more emphasis on this today than there ever was, and a real shift. And competitors are on the rise, and the competitors are shifting. And we've seen this. This is what you're looking at here is a graph that shows international patent applications being filed. And what we're seeing now is China has now surpassed the US in terms of international patent filings. And we knew that China, once they started really getting involved in the intellectual property game and accumulating intangible assets and focusing on the intangibles economy, the game would change. And so we're seeing this with China now surpassing in terms of activity when it comes to capturing valuable intangible stock assets, is what we call them. And the top filers, no surprise, China, the US, Japan, Germany, Korea. And so how are we doing in our own backyard? Not great. So if we look at, this is really to set the stage to understand sort of how our companies are lagging on the global scale and how we're doing in this sort of intangible stock asset game. We're actually on the decline. In a world where we really should be gaining momentum, we don't have a lot of hard patent assets as a country. We really need to be shifting that. And so you look at other countries and how they're moving ahead and really emphasizing this. It's interesting. Saudi Arabia, where I taught an IP course recently, they are making a massive shift and trying to diversify their economy. And they went from they had a 100% increase, for example, in their PCT filings from 2019 to 2020. So you're seeing countries really evolve and realize the importance of the intangible stock assets, this intangibles economy, and really making sure that their companies are benefiting from securing those valuable rights. And why does this matter? I mean, we're a country of SMEs, and when we look at SMEs and when we look at successful SMEs that are scaling, that are getting those great valuations, that are doing well out there, that are more likely to export, they are companies, and there's different studies. This is a European study that came out, but there's been Canadian studies and many global studies with at least one registered IP right are going to earn more revenue per employee, 55% more revenue. And we also know that companies that own both a patent and a trademark generate more revenue and grow faster. So the accumulation, we know there's this high correlation between the companies that focus on the accumulation of intangible stock assets and their valuation. And why will this matter? Because when we're talking about data rooms, what are you going to be showcasing? Your data room is all about showcasing the value of your company. And what will you be showcasing? Those intangible assets for the most part. So, look at a company like Amazon. I mean, how did they hit this $1 trillion valuation? Well, when we break down Amazon, what are we looking at? What do we value when we look at Amazon? Well, that trademark, my God. I mean, that trademark globally is there's so much goodwill wrapped up in that house brand. Immediately, every consumer knows what Amazon is, what it's about. And if it launches a new product, it's very powerful because of what's associated with that brand. We associate that with excellence, with timely delivery, with very good interface, easily usable. So there's so much tied up in that trademark. The source code, the copyright, the process data. Amazon is sitting on a treasure trove of data that they've accumulated over the years. And then their business method patents. Anecdotally, Jeff Bezos himself has 150 patents to his name as an inventor. The GUIs, the graphical user interfaces, they are protecting those as design patents. So they are putting a lot of effort into making sure that their intangible assets are really well protected. And this is really what's driving the value of their company. In fact, this is an image taken from, you're familiar with Amazon, the ability to, with a single click of a mouse, be able to buy a good over the internet. Well, they patented that. And back, over a decade, they were able to assert those patents and seek injunctions to prevent other e-commerce players from being able to quickly sell goods over the internet with a single click of a mouse. So these kinds of assets are helping them to gain freedom to operate in the market and push competitors out. And push competitors out, do they ever? Look at a company like Ecobee. You've probably heard the name Ecobee, a company out of Southern Ontario. Great Canadian SME story, the smart thermostats. They were acquired last year by Generic, but they ended up getting to a point where they were between a rock and a hard place, in large part because they didn't manage their intangible assets, their contracts. They were in this contractual situation where Amazon, because of the contracts Ecobee had signed, Amazon was able to leverage their market dominance to pressure Ecobee into sharing user data, which was at odds with their own user agreements and really put them in a difficult situation. They were dealing with obviously heavy competition from Amazon and Google with its Nest product. And eventually they were forced to, move into an acquisition situation and got acquired by Generic. But this is the story we're seeing with our own companies. We are in the Canadian ecosystem, we're seeing a lot of M&A activity versus seeing our companies really scale, get the valuations they need, and continue to grow in the global marketplace. But as a country, we need to see more of those Canadian headquartered companies succeed. And so how do we do that? By really focusing on our intangible assets and not being too naive about how we need to structure ourselves. So just quickly, before I launch into getting into the data room side of it, I just want to talk a little bit about IP strategy pitfalls, because it plays into how you're going to build a strong data room. Because building a strong data room is really about how you're showcasing your intangible stock assets and really how you're managing those and how organized are you around these things. So public disclosure, do you have your marketing material? Are you putting valuable company information in your marketing materials? What's sitting on your website? What are you disclosing about the company in a public fashion that really you should be maintaining within the confines of the company? And so you've got to be careful about how much you disclose, and whether that is going to prevent you from seeking perhaps valuable IP rights. Putting things out in the public domain may later prevent you from seeking a patent. It's also no longer a trade secret once it's out in the public domain. So you need to make sure you watch things like your public disclosure. And with your data rooms, this ties into data rooms, what are you putting in there? Does it make sense? Are you disclosing things that, you're doing it in advance of really having proper confidentiality measures in place? You need to be thinking about how you're protecting that confidential information. And then non-disclosure agreements. This is one of the biggest pitfalls, issues I find. And when we start to go through due diligence on companies and we look at their non-disclosure agreements, we find that they're using NDAs that they've ripped off the internet. They're executed with maybe the affiliate, but yet the parent company is not associated with the NDA. And yet there's a free sharing of information between the affiliate company and its parent. It's just signed with an individual. There is nothing in the NDA about what happens when you're collaborating and sharing information and new ideas are created. Because once you start getting into a situation where you're sharing confidential information, what's stopping from an investor from giving you a great idea? What's stopping that customer from giving you some feedback that now you want to incorporate into your product? Well, that idea, that's intellectual property. And so who owns that? Does your customer now own feedback that they've given you? So these are the things that we see. An NDA really should have good IP provisions in there to make sure that you're clear on the IP ownership. And we see NDAs, inconsistently used. We see at every turn companies using different NDAs. You are going to get into a situation where, especially if you're a small company and your customers are large, you're business to business focused in terms of your customer segment, you may have different NDAs, but make sure that you understand every time you're signing a new NDA, what you're getting yourself into. I've seen many times where the NDA says mutual non-disclosure agreement, and there's nothing mutual about it. You're handing over your information, but there's no requirement for them to protect that information. It's very one-sided. So the devil really is in the details. And when you're then getting in the situation of having your data rooms reviewed for the purposes of due diligence, that's what they're looking at. What is in those NDAs and what exposure do you have? And looking for those red flags. Employee agreements and contracts. I mean, do they properly cover intellectual property? After you get off this masterclass, do a control F on your employment agreements. Are the words moral rights in there? And if they're not, it means your employees, when they leave you, are walking away with valuable rights that are related to copyright and still have a bit of leverage in terms of downstream maybe coming back and saying, look, my moral rights have been infringed. So just do a control F. If you don't have moral rights waived in your employee or contractor agreements, you've got something missing there already. And there's some easy free advice. But what happens when your employee leaves for your competitor? Do you have obligations that continue with them to maintain confidentiality? Do you have obligations that run with them? Maybe they were a key inventor for your company and they are part of patents. Well, they will have downstream obligations to sign agreements later. Is that built into there? And then this is really where, I see a lot of our smaller, younger companies get really excited about collaborations, joint ventures. And yet, what does that joint venture look like in terms of the ownership of intellectual property? How do you exit that joint venture? Like, what does it look like when you walk away? We get all excited about how's this joint venture going to work? How are we going to collaborate? How are we going to do things? Who's going to do what? But how do you disentangle from that? That is the biggest issue. You're never going to look at a contract unless the parties have a fallout. So how do you disentangle? And you can bet dollars to donuts that, again, on due diligence, we're going to want, the lawyers reviewing your data rooms for due diligence are going to want to see, okay, how do you disentangle from this relationship? Is there a period of time where, for example, you get to dance for 6 months while you disentangle? Have you built in those timeframes, or are you walking away after 14 business days or 30 business days? Trade secrets, another area where a lot of companies will tell me, oh yeah, I'm a digital company, but I don't have patents. My strategy really is, we got copyright, we got trademarks, we've got trade secrets. We keep things, we're SaaS, so we keep things in a black box. Everything is tucked away. But trade secrets, it's not enough to say that we've got trade secrets. What are you doing to maintain those trade secrets as secrets, what reasonable measures are what you're going to need to show. So if you have a trade secret theft downstream, what reasonable measures are you taking? And when we're looking at building out your data room to show that, look, these are your intellectual property rights. I got copyright, I've got trademarks, I've got trade secrets. Okay, well, where's your trade secret policy? What measures are you taking within the company to protect your trade secrets? Does everyone in the company have access to everything? Or are there certain protocols, and what are those protocols? And are you reviewing them on a regular basis? I mean, anecdotally, small companies, we need to learn from the big companies and how they do this. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, which is, the world's most valuable semiconductor company. Anecdotally, because there's been so much talk about what the situation between China and Taiwan, but, they're the world's largest dedicated, pure play semiconductor foundry. And they recently announced that they have about 150,000 trade secrets cataloged and tracked, and that they really take the reasonable measures in terms of protecting their trade secrets very seriously. And so no one's expecting an SME to have 150,000 trade secrets cataloged, but we are, there is an expectation that there is a policy, that there are reasonable measures being taken. So that is a little bit about that. So in terms of intangible asset management, I mean, not managing this well, not having information well organized is really costly. And if every time I mention, any founder who's been through due diligence for investment, I mean, it starts to give people PTSD. And so, the earlier you can get prepared for fundraising, the earlier you can be working on your data room, and the more consistently you can be keeping your data room organized, the better off you'll be. In fact, I argue that a data room is something that you should always have live and running, and it should be really part of your corporate dashboard that you look at as an executive leadership to make sure that, look, how is our company as a totality looking? And, are we continuing to go in the right direction? So your data room, of course, you'll position a data room for a particular investment round, but it's something that you should be continuing to update, to maintain, so that you're always ready for valuation. You're always ready for government funding. You know what you look like from a valuation perspective. And so it's costly because, of course, if you have to start searching for documents, what's the cost of your lawyer having to help you search for documents, requesting information from them, from your accountants, resending documents? This is, the less organized you are, the more expensive it is to put these data rooms together and to be ready for due diligence. And then, of course, you don't have that shareholder agreement ready to go. You've got weak brand protection. You've got a brand, but it's not registered as a trademark. You have a lack of NDA usage. A lot of things that have happened are a handshake. That is going to be a red flag. And each one of these red flags, as someone goes through your data room and someone goes through due diligence, is bringing that valuation down and down and down, and maybe to the point where the deal just implodes and there is no investment. Or you get to a point where, worst case scenario, there are patents out there, for example, that will block your company from really scaling in the US market or from scaling in Europe. Like, how aware are you of what your competitors have for intellectual property rights? For technology companies, we see this as a massive deal breaker. All of a sudden, patent pops up and you're hooped. So it's important to be thinking. And so IP due diligence is a large component of due diligence. That's a large component of the review that will happen. And so, you want to be thinking about at a company level, how do you do business when it comes to your IP best practices, your confidential information, your policies and your agreements. And then at a technology level, when I say all IP is not created equal, if you're really, a software company with very unique algorithms, relying on your copyright protection is really not going to be, all that valuable to you. As we know, if you're anyone that's on the software side knows, there's thousands of ways to code something. If you really want to protect the functional blocks and how you do something, that is really ripe for a patent. So, all IP isn't really the same. And if you've got IP rights, are they strong? Like, what kinds of contracts do you have in place? And do you really have freedom to operate? Now you want to move into the European market, and that's why you need investment. Well, do you have the freedom to operate there? What's your competition looking like? What kinds of IP rights do they have? How are they dominating the market share? The kinds of questions I get to use to review in due diligence are things like, does the company or its patent counsel routinely conduct freedom to operate searches? Do you routinely go out there and do a sweep of your competitors to see if they hold any patents that might be a problem for you? Are you aware of patents owned by third parties that the company's products or planned products infringe or may infringe upon? This is part of a due diligence checklist. Like when you're building out your data room, you get a due diligence checklist. That's going to really color how you organize your data room. And these are the types of questions you'll get. Do you have adequate procedures in place to protect your confidential information from disclosure? Okay, great. Show me, and that will need to be presented in the data room. So these type of questions you will be facing, and you need to have answers to those, and they will need to be documented and in the data room. So really data rooms, let's like getting right into data rooms now. The answers to those tough questions, as I said, I was highlighting some of those tough questions, they've got to be found in your data room. And so data rooms are really there to help simplify and accelerate fundraising rather than, if you don't use a data room, what you're doing is you're, collating information and sending that in bundles, whether you're doing that, through a mailed submission to someone, you're handling someone some documentation. Like hopefully you're not doing in this digital age, but people are sending still information by paper, but you're not doing that in an organized fashion. And you want to make sure that every investor that you're approaching is looking at you and getting a chance to evaluate everything, right? You don't want to be handing disparate information to different folks and having inconsistency. So it's really about the cost reduction. So having a well-organized data room, it's the equivalent of maybe reducing the requirement to have them go pitch to someone and sorry, just gonna have a sip of water here. And having to go on site. So you're really, by having a really complete data room and giving someone the ability to see your company properly in an organized way can really avoid you having to sit down with them in person and go through that, or to get on a long video call, because it's all there and it's all there in an organized way. It also enhances due diligence, right? So I think if you base your data room off the due diligence checklist that you're receiving, it can really enhance the whole process and make it just easy for an investor to orient themselves around your data room. So you really, it's one of, by using a proper data room structure, it's helpful that way. The other thing with a lot of the virtual data rooms that are out there, you're able to track the engagement. And that's very telling because I don't know if you've heard a lot of people talk about, you got to kiss 100 frogs before you meet your prince when it comes to fundraising. I mean, there's a lot of no's in the fundraising process. And, why are you getting those no's? Why are people walking away? What are they looking at that's turning them off from the company? And so paying particular attention, through your virtual data room, paying particular attention to where they're going within the data room, where they're not going, what they're looking at, what they're not looking at, and then trying to help understand that rejection, particularly if they're not giving you a reason for the no. Having some insight through the audit trail, through the engagement tracking that happens within those data rooms can be really, really helpful. So you're able to, and I think that what's important is you want to iterate on that structure. So as you're getting that feedback, as you may be getting rejections or folks saying, look, I think your value is somewhere down here, and you're not being satisfied with that because that's not going to be good enough in order to give you that flywheel that you need to really spur and have that exponential growth, which you're looking for. You want to iterate on that data room structure. You want to iterate on the substance that's in that data room structure, and make sure that it hits the right note with investors. And then it's just, again, having the proper data room set up, it just provides convenient access and it creates more elevated decision-making for the investor. So you want to have that well structured for them. It's more inclusive deal process, so everyone's getting a fair shot to look at the same company information, and it's all there and it's well communicated, so that you're getting ahead of their questions and you're able to preempt a lot of the tough stuff, so that you can really move into closing the deal with the investor. And then security is really key. So one of the things you want to be looking at when you're setting up your virtual data room is who's going to have access to that within the company. it probably doesn't make sense that everyone within the company should have access to the data room. So there may be folks within your company that are putting certain information in there. You're going to have outside advisors, maybe your accountants, your lawyers are feeding into that as well. You've got to be mindful that you want to be, using a data room product that is secure. Be mindful of where that information is sitting. Are you sitting on Canadian servers? Anecdotally, Fortress is on the AWS infrastructure. So our data rooms can sit on Canadian servers. Similarly, if we have US-based customers on our platform, their data is sitting in the US. So things to think about, making sure that you've got good security, and that also you're differentiating that access. So investment, particularly as you're going through due diligence, it's a dance. And so there may be an initial review of your company. You will probably want to remove certain information, or just repackage in a way that's provides a sort of simpler overview of the company. And then as you move through your conversations with that investor, you start to layer in more information as you move through the process, and the investor is really serious about digging into the company. So what you're looking at here is just a screenshot of a basic data room structure that we provide in Fortress that can be tailored. So this would be an example of something that you might have a setup for a due diligence. This is actually a structure that we used for our own financing last year. So it's fairly basic, but in financing, they're going to want to see things like your capital assets, your corporate records, information about your employees and directors, your financials, your IP policies and technologies, legal and insurance. Where's the company headed in terms of new ideas? That one's optional, but shareholder information. So really the primary purpose is really just, again, to speed up and simplify this fundraising and, get the best valuation possible. So really your setup should be intuitive. It should be straightforward. It should be easy to find information. And so you can have really as many folders and sections and subfolders as you want, but just make sure that you don't overly complicate things, and that at every level in the hierarchy of your data room, that you're putting yourself in the shoes of the investor that is looking at you for the first time, that doesn't necessarily know all the aspects of your company, doesn't really understand your technology that well. You want to make sure that you're looking at it from that outsider's perspective and not getting lost in some kind of overly complicated hierarchy, and do things to personalize it and professionalize it too. Get your colors in there, get your branding in there, and then make sure that you're then thinking about assigning access rights. Should everything be shared with everyone, or are we going to show initially just certain things like the financials and maybe certain high-level things about our IP policies and our new ideas? Again, so apply those access conditions. Maybe what you want to do, and some virtual data rooms will do this, is with every access to information, it prompts the user who's coming into your data room to sign off on an NDA feature. So they have to agree that, yes, I'm going to look at this, but I'm going to maintain this as confidential. So be thinking about, how much layering of confidentiality you want. It never hurts to have, more layers of protection, more assurances that, yes, this person guarantees that they will keep this information confidential. And then be able to then invite users using unique access links. So you don't want to have access to your data room just floating around for anyone to get into. And I know for some of the basic features, some companies will, build their data rooms out of their Google Drives, and then, access, depending on how you permission it, can be just shared widely. So you've got to really be careful about how you're permissioning things. And then when you're, this isn't shown in this data room structure, but maybe what you want to do also is just have a company overview section where you provide, a one-page executive summary about your company. The pitch deck that you're using right now for investors, have that there front and center. The business plan, if you have a business plan, the strategy summary, maybe the SWOT analysis, so that, an analysis showing what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the company. That's a question that comes up a lot. Can you articulate to me what those are when you're going through a due diligence review? And then, getting into financials, we're going to want to see What are the various asset sources you have, and how are you using them? What are your operating budgets? What are your projections? A lot of times investors want to see at least 3 years worth of financial projections, going into sometimes 5 years, the balance sheet that's up to date, the income cash flow statements, outstanding debt info. So that all needs to configure in your financials. And coming back to what drives me in terms of investment these days is the team. The team, you hear this time and time again in terms of valuations, in terms of investment. At the end of the day, we felt that this was the team that could execute on that strategy. And so the team's critically important, and how you showcase your technical team, your sales team, your marketing team, like the entire crew, is really important. So provide things, feature those titles, job descriptions. You are going to be asked information about salaries. Are you paying people appropriately, or incentivizing them through stock options in a way that they're going to stay, or is there risk of churn in terms of your talent? Provide an organizational structure. That's something, an organizational team structure. That's something that's commonly requested in due diligence in a data room. So you might even want to start with that. Just have an organizational structure in terms of your team, who's there, who reports to whom, and have that within the data room. And then, employee agreements. So as you move through due diligence, your investors are going to want to make sure that your key employees have proper agreements in place. And so that is something that's going to need to be featured in there. Also, what are your future hiring plans? We're living in an era where, people aren't sticking around for their golden watch after 30 years. And, we're in the era of the gig economy. And, we've seen through COVID, just how much shifting has happened within companies. It's hard to find tech talent. And so making sure that you have, do you have plans, or how will you're going to be getting this investment. They're going to want to see that translate into human resources. Where are you going to find those human resources, and what does that look like? As well, your investment strategy. So, the describing, the cap table, investment charts, the voting agreements, all of those things need to be included in there. And then another aspect is market research. So this comes up time and time again through due diligence. I know we got asked that as well. The competitive market analysis, who are you competing with? Do you have market reports you can share that would help color the valuation? Third-party market reports, those kind of things are great to include and great to showcase within your data room. And so this provides an example of just kind of as you go down into corporate records, and this is just showing you what it looks like as a default structure in Fortress. But you come down now, you've got these sub-menus, so your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, your corporate structure, legal counsel, your minute books, corporate records. And within our system, it's very clear to the investors they come in that, okay, there are about 3 documents in the bylaws section. Oh, okay, there's 4 documents to look at in the minute book. So choosing a platform that is really simple, that is easy for someone to use, is really important, because the other thing is that typical investors, particularly once you're in front of VCs, they are looking at a lot of investment opportunities every week. And so if they can get into a data room and it's just easy to find things and it's well structured, they're going to be more inclined to dig deeper, because it's just easy to find the information versus someone with a structure that's just overly complicated. So in terms of takeaways really from data rooms and how you build your data rooms, the key thing that you want to think about is be organized and get organized early. I mean, if you're thinking about fundraising in 6 months to a year, you should be building your data room now. And there's no time like the present to get started. Even if you're not fundraising right now, you need to be thinking about how do you organize all of your contracts? How are you organizing your shareholder information, your financials? If you're sitting right now as a small company and you've got, your financial information sits with your accountant, your incorporation documents sit with your lawyer, and your business plans, okay, they sit with you, you need to start thinking about bringing that information together. Really, all of it should sit within the company, because if you don't know what your shareholder agreement looks like, if you don't have a keen eye on that cap table, if you don't have a keen eye on the stock options that you're dispensing every year and what that's doing, in terms of the dilution factor. If you don't really understand where you're at as a company, how can you really be strategic around that? So be organized, get organized early, get it all in writing. So many of our small companies, I see this time and time again as a lawyer. Well, we talked about that, but we didn't, that's not in the agreement, that we just know that we're going to do that, or we just know it's going to be like this. Pen never refused paper. You've got to get everything in writing. You can't showcase handshake deals in a data room. So it's really critically important to be thinking about making sure that you're getting those, every aspect that you want in a contract, get that in writing. And use your data rooms on a continuous basis. There's no reason why, once you're done this fundraising, and I know a lot of you are probably tuning in because you will be fundraising. Once you're done fundraising, there isn't any reason why you shouldn't be continuing to build on that data room and use that. Have your executive team use that as really a dashboard for the company and really grow with that data room and keep it organized on a continuous basis. And that will help inform your IP strategy, because one of the things I mentioned here as a takeaway is IP strategy is not a box you check. Having a strategy around your intangible assets and how you're going to grow those intangible stock assets for your company. Because if we know the value of your company is really going to be driven by your intangible assets, the strategy around that's just going to continue to evolve. Well, having a data room and really looking, for example, at that intellectual property section, saying, okay, this is where we're at. We still haven't filed for patents yet. Okay, fine. So, where are we at with our trade secrets? Are we keeping a keen eye on those? Are any of those trade secrets really at a point now where we really should move those into patent filings? Is there anything that we're doing particularly innovative with our interface where we might want to file for design protection? Oh, we have a trademark registered for our company name in Canada, but now we're in the US and we actually haven't registered our trademark in the US. So having that information accessible to your executives in an organized data room enables you to continue to kind of look at those things and say, okay, yeah, we're moving into the European market now. We need to make sure we can use our company's name in this new market. The last thing we want to do is have to have a company name change or product name change and get slapped with, someone's got a confusingly similar trademark in Europe and be stopped in our tracks. And big companies make this mistake all the time. I mean, Apple, classic one, iPad was a registered trademark in China. And so Apple, found themselves, that was a little bit of a massive goop up probably on the IP department, but they tried to enter the Chinese market with the iPad and they couldn't. And so that was a kick up with the trademarks. Similarly, Target, when they tried to come into Canada, well, guess what? Target was a trademark owned by another clothier company that had operations in Canada. It was a Target retail company in Canada with several stores. And so Target had to then pay millions of dollars to acquire those trademark rights. So it happens. And then this, and similarly, unfortunately, on the receiving side, I see companies moving into new markets, establishing business and then getting slapped with a cease and desist because they're now in a market where someone else owns a registered trademark, and their use of that trademark is confusingly similar with someone else's trademark. And it's hard to find that, unless you're doing proper due diligence and doing proper registrability searches and proper freedom to operate searches, you're not necessarily going to find that. For example, if your product name is elephant, well, Oliphant sounds similar. And if you both are working in the same space selling similar products, the company selling Oliphant spelled with an O, spelled totally differently, which you would not pick up on just an easy Google search, is going to take issue with your selling of a product named Elephant because it sounds too similar and it's confusing for the customer. So those are the kinds of things. It's not so simple to be really aware of that kind of confusion. So it's important to keep revisiting that to make sure that you've got freedom to operate in the markets where you want to do business, and being organized, having a data room where it showcases, your IP rights is something that is going to hold you in good stead. And again, we see coming back to, the data is just, it's out there now. We know empirically that, companies that are registering their rights, that are taking the time to get patents and trademarks registered, are growing faster, are getting higher valuations. So the data room, I mean, we're not building data rooms for the sake of data rooms. Data rooms are about show me the money. It's about getting high valuations. And then finally, one of the other things, again, as a small company is, and you are going to be judged on this when you go through due diligence, is what does the divorce look like? So when you're signing those contracts, how do you get out of this contract? What do those penalties look like? You know, is there a shoulder period where you can unpack yourself? Do you need, and this is a classic one, I see small companies getting into deals with large companies, and those customer agreements require you, if you want to be, if you want to then exit. So, and a lot of our Canadian companies do end up in an M&A situation where they get acquired. Well, guess what? The acquirer can't take over that contract because you cannot assign the contract to the new company. So you've got to make sure you have a contract that's worded such that your customer doesn't have a say, and you're able to assign those contracts to your new entity. Or what if you want to reorganize the company in some way, but you can't assign your customer agreements unless you get the consent of your customer? That's a red flag for valuation. And that comes up a lot. Again, I see companies getting so excited about getting the deal done. They focus so much on what they're going to be doing. They don't think about how you get out of the situation, how you get out of a contract. It's the last part of that contract that really matters. The term of the contract, the termination clause, the assignment of the clause. And also, you're never looking at that contract unless there's some kind of dispute or problem. So how do you resolve disputes? Is it mandatory arbitration? Can you go to the courts? Are you able to seek injunctive relief? Take a look at those. And also, where is the dispute going to be? Again, you're going to be judged on this. Okay, so you have all these customer agreements, or you have all these agreements, and you've got to litigate those in India. So your entire development team, for example, is in India, and if you have a problem with them or there's intellectual property theft, you're going to go argue in Delhi. That's never happening. So you want to be able to make sure that you understand the choice of forum that you're going to be in for dispute resolution. If you can't get Ontario, Ontario would be ideal, obviously, for Ontario headquartered companies. I say take New York. New York is similar to Ontario. Keep that in the back of your mind. Delaware, avoid California, but New York allows the parties to contract in the way they want to be contracted. And if you're based in Ontario, New York's not that far away to go, versus the time zone difference with California, and also just the costs of being in California for dispute resolution, for litigation. So those are kind of some words of advice on that. And then finally, so tomorrow, and I love asking this question, if you came along, a really great investor to your company, whether that be a company or an individual, are you, knowing that 90% of your valuation will be based on your intangible assets, and they want to see your data room, are you ready? Are you ready to showcase your intangible assets in the way that you need to? And so that's really where I'll leave off here. So please be in touch, and you can reach me on LinkedIn. You can reach me at Fortress.Legal or at Brion Raffoul through my law firm as well.
Natalie, that was incredible. I don't even actually know where to start. There was so much vital information for entrepreneurs, their investors, their prospective investors, their team, and the information that you shared on the importance of the data room. I feel like, that was 50 minutes with you, but I feel like that just went by really, really quickly. So thank you for just brain dumping everything that's in that you've learned through your practice, and you've learned through building Fortress.Legal, the specific takeaways, the really tangible examples that you gave that we can see, the impact to innovation and technology. Before I go into a formal thank you, I know that there are, looks like there's 4 questions, and I would love to be able to just whip through those if we can. Well, we have a few more minutes, because I think they're actually really good questions. I'll start with the first one. Do pre-seed or pre-revenue companies need a data room? I think I know the answer to this, but I'd love to hear, a little bit more from you on that.
They do. I mean, even in the friends and family round, your friends, your family are probably going to want to get a proper snapshot of your company. And so even at that point, you may be looking at that, but certainly the pre-seed, because pre-seed, seed, really, you're looking at angel investors typically. And so those, they're sophisticated investors. These are folks that invest on a regular basis. I myself I'm an angel investor as well. And we want to see a data room. So you need to be at the stage of pre-seed, seed. You need to be building in a data room. It's not going to have necessarily the same complexity as when you're getting into Series A, Series B. I mean, things will be more simplified, but you need to be thinking about you need to build
the
a data
concept of
room.
having all of that information in one spot, and for that to be a place where, when your executive meeting is happening on a biweekly or a monthly basis, that you're doing a due diligence check on your data room. And if you're starting that habit early in growing your business, then you know where you can find your most up-to-date information. And if that is that your data room is then that externally facing for those who have specific opportunity to be into your data room, then it just creates a positive habit from the very beginning. Okay, so another question here. If you have pending intellectual property, how can you strengthen your claim that you will eventually receive that IP, knowing that there has been a bit of a delay in licensing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so often what we do for due diligence purposes is we'll provide opinions. So you can have your intellectual property valued. There are actually, and I have great contacts in the area, some folks I use down in the US too, that do valuation of IP portfolios and do valuations of portfolios that are at an application stage as well. But you can also get an opinion on that from an IP lawyer on what you have, because once you're patent pending or you have a trademark application filing, you already have an asset. A patent pending is worth something, because what it says is, guess what, world, you can't now, I've now carved something in the sand on this idea, this invention, and no one can come after you now and file for that same thing. So it's giving you a block. Now, you're right. What will that protection look like? How patentable is that? I mean, it can change. You maybe think you've invented, something quite expansive. At the end, when you get through the patent office, they whittled you down, and it's a narrower invention potentially. But you put your flag in the sand, so that's already worth something. And same thing with trademark application. Now, you've got your trademark application in there. It is a first to file system. So you want to get in there, even though there are, from a trademark point of view, there's a wrinkle to that with use, but not all jurisdictions are use-based. But anyway, it's a race to the IP office. So getting in there already, that will have a value for you. And the other thing I always say too is, and what's not always measurable is, what's the deterrent effect of now being able to say to your competition, we're patent pending? Mm-hmm. What's the deterrent effect of just slapping that on your website? Right. Or putting the TM? If you walk away today, again, free thing, slap the TM on all of your slogans, anything you're using in your business as a trademark, you should have the TM in superscript on there. The R with the circle is for a registered trademark. But if every business will have trademarks. And so you want to be putting the public on notice that this is our trademark. This slogan, this is a trademark of ours, because you have rights also at common law. So there is value already. And so, you want to be able to showcase that.
Love it. There's even more questions coming in. So I'm hoping that we might be able to keep you a little bit past the 5 o'clock, and that we still have a really strong audience. So for whomever can stay on, we'll go through these questions. Are there any unreasonable data room asks from investors to look out for in due diligence?
You've got to be careful about your trade secrets. So, proprietary algorithms and things. I mean, what you want to do is showcase what they can do, but you've really got to be very careful about, if you do have to disclose, certain trade secrets, you want to make sure you really understand the rationale of why the investor needs to see that, and carefully show that, and make sure that you've taken reasonable measures to limit the access to that as well. So that is, you've got to really be careful about that. You shouldn't have to provide source code and with system architecture diagrams and things that are not in the public domain in that way. So be very careful about that as well.
Okay. And even when you speak about access, one of the questions is, do you feel like a Google Drive is sufficient as a data room at the early stages of investment?
So the challenge with Google Drive is that you do need to go in there and create. There's no structure in there for you, right? So you're kind of freelancing it, if you will, and freestyling it. And this is where I find you can get, you're losing the forest for the trees, and you just get lost in the structure, and then it becomes very hard to map that back in. It's also not giving your investor the sense of any kind of sophistication around building the data room. So you're using like a very basic product. So it can be suitable, and people use Dropbox as well, but it's more time consuming downstream, and it doesn't have any sort of built-in structure there, indexing, audit trails that you can use. So, and it doesn't have the reporting capability as well. So early stage, maybe friends and family, but you may want to look at, as you grow as a company, a virtual data room that's at the right price point for where you're at, that can provide you with a little bit more enhanced functionality and security, quite frankly.
Right. Okay, thank you. What should you not put in your data room?
So again, I was talking a little bit about trade secrets. I think you have to be careful about employee information. You want to talk about the key hires. As you move forward, they're going to want to see the sort of the key executives, the key employees. They may need to look at those employment agreements, but you may need to redact information about that. And then I don't know that you don't need to provide every single employment agreement, every single contractor agreement. So give some thought around that, because that is, highly confidential information. It's information about your employees, personal information. So you want to be careful around that.
Awesome. Okay. And the last question we've got is, which aspects of a good data room are missing most often when companies enter due diligence?
That's a good question. So I think that the like good financial projections are often missing. And you haven't really detailed out your assumptions. So that is one where people want to understand, okay, well, how do you actually think you're going to get there? Like, show me, what it looks like on a month by month, year by year basis, how you see that growth playing out. And I want to see that map to, okay, we know your people are going to be your biggest cost, show me that, that increased sales with those increased sales hires. And what does that look like? And show me how you get, how you get profitable. And so the more sophisticated financials tend to be missing. Again, not IP savvy. This is a problem in Canada. So, not really having good understanding, saying, we're focused on trade secrets, but you don't have a trade secret policy document. You don't take reasonable measures. So these are going to be red flags. Make sure whatever lane you're picking in, because every company has an IP strategy, make sure you can articulate it. So that's another area. And then not having all of your shareholder documentation in order, particularly as a younger company, is another big issue as well.
Okay, well, we're just on time. I mean, that concludes our masterclass today. And again, a huge thank you to Natalie for leading such an imperative and applicable masterclass on building the data room, throwing in the deep understanding and deep knowledge that you have as an expert in IP in Canada and globally, quite frankly, I think has been a double bonus for us today. Recognizing
happy fundraising.
Yes, exactly. And keeping and supporting us and keeping IP at the forefront. For those who are on the live version today, I want to share with you that there's an offering through World Discoveries at Western. They're launching their intellectual property strategy bootcamp this fall, and we'll pop that link in the chat in case you want to have more information about IP. And of course, our venture growth team is always happy to spend time with folks who are beginning to articulate their IP strategy, or beginning to take the information, particularly from today, on putting together and actually building your data room and figuring out where there could be a potential miss, where due diligence won't be deep enough with the information you've got. And really just having a second set of eyes on the potential for the misses in your data room and the shape of it and the structure of it. So on behalf of Tech Alliance, Natalie, I want to thank you for joining us today, and to our participants, thank you for joining us as well. Be sure to continue to look in on our upcoming events. That keeps you up to date on innovation technology. So again, Natalie, thanks for your time today. Stay safe and be well.
Take
Yeah.
care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take good care. Bye for now.